And so that's what I would use. There, in fact, are studies that have come out in just the last few years about how the light off a computer screen is chronobiologically active. It actually does, and it's probably contributing to sleep, issues with teenagers and young people that are using workstations late in the evening to do all the various things that they do. Their social lives these days, social media, and it's causing sleep restriction by causing kids to become even more phase delayed than they normally are. That's a characteristic of adolescence, is that the circadian clock tends to be more strongly delayed. The end of adolescence is when your circadian clock starts to phase advance. From the ages of 20, 21, 22, it's been recently proposed as a new marker for the end of adolescence. That's when you stop being so much of a night owl and start to become more of an early bird, and that begins around the ages of 21, 22. And
so that would mean that a lot of the athletes, the people who are working with you, are adolescents.
Yeah, at least by that definition.
21, 22.
There isn't really a hardcore, a standard definition for the adolescence.
Yeah.
But that is one interesting biological process that changes. And so that's another way to define the end of adolescence. So the screens do matter. So I turn mine down as low as I can, and I still think it's too bright, so now I'm putting glasses on.
And then you can actually use it to your advantage in the opposite way as well.
Yes.
You can use it as a tool.
Yeah. I've been meaning to write an app that tells you when to get light exposure, and there are some out there. But also one in which it would serve as a bright light. You have to plug in. But as far as getting light, if it's in the dark and you're trying to get light to shift your clock, and you don't have access to outdoor light, there are portable light boxes that you can buy. London Drugs, I think they're $50 to $100, something like that. The Light Book is a Canadian one, and it's effective. Yep.
What about the light visors?
Light visors, could also work, except
$200 a piece?
well, they're probably expensive, much more expensive than they need to be. But they also limit what you can do, because you're wearing a visor with a light pointing in your eyes. And it's better to just use indirect. So you get a light box, and you let it reflect off whatever it is that you're. Well, what I might do, and I've done in my office, is I have one to the side of my workstation, so I just glance at it, or I let the light come in my peripheral vision.
And in terms of traveling with a light device, is there anything that would be travel?
The Light Book is actually made for that.
Okay.
It's really small.
They're size of a skin.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're quite light. They're just plastic with LEDs. They're glary, so some people don't like the glariness of the LEDs, but they're of the right spectrum because they're very blue. Yep.
Something in terms of resetting the clock with shift workers. You're saying if you go east, avoid the sunrise. If you got a shift workers changing from night shifts to day shifts, you probably want to not avoid the sunrise. You probably want to.
It's very it's complex. It depends on what what the shift schedule is. If they're on a rapidly rotating shift schedule, there's no hope for the circadian clock to shift fast enough. So what I would recommend for shift workers, like at the airport where they go 2 days, 2 nights, 4 days off, is to do what they can to maintain a diurnal phase and not shift. What happens is they shift partially, and they become neither nocturnal nor diurnal. And their worst shifts are the day shifts, some of them tell me, because they can't fall asleep. They become extreme night owls. If you're working permanent nights, then we can do something for you. And as far as telling you when to seek light and avoid light, to actually invert your clock. But that's really hard to do. Even permanent night workers, for the most part, their circadian clocks don't adapt because they, in a sense, fall off the wagon. They can't control the light exposure as completely as they would need to. Okay, so melatonin is something that can be used. Hypnotics, there's no evidence that these cause phase shifts. And surprisingly, the same is true for stimulants. So caffeine, modafinil, which is now used by shift workers, and it can also be used. It's also used by narcoleptics for daytime sleepiness. It also does not reset the clock. So these are hypnotics and stimulants are going to have effects on behavioral state, but they're not going to be resetting the circadian clock. Exercise is really, really potent for hamsters. I can eliminate jet lag in a hamster. I can reset a hamster to European time within one cycle by strategic application of a bout of exercise in combination with a shifted light dark cycle. It's really remarkable. And that was discovered in 1986, 87, 88. And 10 years of studies with humans have shown that it just doesn't do the same thing. It's a much weaker stimulus for humans. Where you see it exercising late in the evening and until the early morning, it actually phase delays the clock. There may be a small phase advancing effect of exercise in the early evening. And food should be important. There's just simply no studies that have been done to look at the effects of food as a resetting stimulus for the clock that controls our rest activity cycles. The timing of food is critical for peripheral clocks. So when you eat meals is determining the phasing of liver rhythms and intestinal rhythms and the adrenal rhythms and the kidney and the heart and the lungs. All of these organs are oscillating, and what they are, the timing of those oscillations is phased with meal times, regular meal times. But whether food controls the clock that controls our rest activity cycle and our performance rhythms simply hasn't been established in humans yet. So if you read anything about anti-jet lag diets, there really isn't any evidence for it. I got this off the web yesterday, anti-jet lag diet. And you'll see that probably anytime you pick up a magazine on an airplane, there'll be anti-jet lag remedies in there. There'll be aromatherapy, forget about it. There'll be jet lag diets. There'll be a variety of things. If they're not talking about light or melatonin, then they're not talking about anything that's substantiated with any kind of evidence. And since you can't patent light, then nobody's going to be advertising for the use of light. So based on everything that I've said, the recommendations would be, these are general recommendations. You want to design travel, light exposure, sleep, and practice schedules to shift or to avoid shifting circadian rhythms as appropriate. This would be the general recommendation that you would make based on the chronobiology that we talked about. You want to adjust, you can do this for the team as a whole, but you also want to be aware of individual differences, and that there are going to be a range of chronotypes in any group of people. There's going to be some people who are early birds and some people who are night owls. My wife and I are about 2 hours apart in chronotype. Every single day she's in bed 2 hours before me, and she wakes up 2 hours before me. That simply has never changed for her. We're synchronized, but not in phase. So there are enduring and profound individual differences, and so you want to accommodate those in the design of a shift's, any kind of schedule for somebody. And how do you know about these individual differences? Well, you give them chronotype assessments, and you can do that with the tools that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. There's a variety of questionnaires now that are pretty good at getting at that. If you want to have good, hard, objective data, then you have somebody wear an ActiWatch for a couple of weeks, and then you've got a nice record of their activity rhythms over the course of their work week and also the course of the days off. The days off are really important for telling you what the timing of people's rhythms are. And the other important recommendation would be that individuals that are traveling outside of North America, that they be provided with sleep and light exposure schedules to handle the much larger and more challenging effects of traveling across more than 3 time zones. So traveling to Europe is actually a very significant chronobiological challenge for somebody from the West. Traveling to Australia, Japan can also be, again, everything's going to depend on the specific circumstances, what the trip is for, if it's for athletic competition, when those events are going to be. All of that needs to go into into designing appropriate schedules that can minimize